Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3644. Today's date is October 15, 2025. It's been almost like a night at 9:28 p.m. All right. Um, First of all, today I task myself that I should supposed to be make two piece of content today. Okay, yeah, like two piece of content. Like I'm a content creator. I make content regarding about graphic designing, Photoshop, photography, and usually I make sure that my content should supposed to be uploaded every single day. From last couple of days, I was not actually because of I'm kind of like a something busy at home. I won't be able to upload the content. Okay, yeah. I make sure that my content should supposed to be uploaded every single day. For this purpose, I usually upload my content like a like in schedule base. Okay, schedule base means like that. If I make two piece of content today, then those two piece of content should supposed to be uploaded tomorrow and day after tomorrow. Okay, so that means if I make two piece of content today, that means I have 2 days of gaps. Okay, this is what I want. I wanted to kind of like simply schedule my content in advance. Okay, yeah, and I need at least like a 3 days of gap so that I would kind of like a literally free. Okay, yeah, free for like a free from kind of like a some stuff that I wanted to do. There are a lot of stuff that I do. Like in my entire day schedule, I won't be able to kind of like a create two piece of content. I kind of like a simply upload only one piece of content. Okay, yeah, because if I try to upload two piece of content, then other tasks are kind of like a simply hampered. What is exactly other task? Other tasks like basically, let me tell you my entire day schedule. Soon as I wake up in the morning, I record my artifact. Then after that, I read my book for half an hour. Then I have do some sort of work at home, like mop the floor and things like that. Okay, yeah. Then after that, kind of like somebody showered, had a lunch, and then after that, I kind of like simply play some of the games, micro learning, Duolingo, then Elevate, Lumosity, Brilliant. Usually, for almost like a 20-minute, 10-minute, half an hour. It will take almost like a 2 hour. Oh yeah. And then after that, app development course. It also kind of like a half an hour. So if I kind of like consume everything, then it would take me almost like a entire afternoon, like a till 3 p.m. I kind of like a done, and after the 3 p.m. I started making my content. So if I started making content after the 3 p.m., that means I can able to make design till the 6 p.m. and then after that I went to work out, run and things like that. And soon as I came, I kind of like simply make my reels after I ate my dinner and things like that. So basically, this thing, my schedule is really tight. Okay, yeah, that's why I can't be able to kind of like make two piece of content. So that's why today I kind of like sacrifice all those things that I shouldn't ever do any kind of like a Duolingo, micro learning or app development, nothing really at all. I kind of like focus on content creation. Now basically I make one piece of content today which went really good. Okay, yeah, and which also kind of like done very fast. Now another piece of content that I wanted to make, the design, that design went failure. Yeah, like basically the way that I kind of like thought that I should supposed to be execute this design in this way, but it doesn't really happen in that way. And and I try multiple times, it failed. Then I decided to set another design, basically instead of this design is not really work, so kind of like a focus on another design. I try to execute that another design. That another design is also went failure too. It was like a really horrific things. Like basically today I decided that I should supposed to be upload two piece of content, and I only upload only one piece of content, and it was like a really fucked up thing for me. Okay, yeah. I got really stressed out and things like that, but I managed myself. I went to workout, I run, I came home early, and I had a dinner. Right now I'm recording Artifact. After the Artifact, I'm gonna focus on another piece of content. Okay, yeah. Now this piece of content that I selected is not really that much difficult. It's quite an easy and things like that. Every problem that you are gonna face has a kind of like a some sort of learning things and some sort of mistakes that you have to figure it out. What exactly mistake happened? What exactly mistake happened? That why you kind of like a fail? Why the design went failure? Well, the basically is this thing. One of the biggest mistakes actually happened that ki I kind of like overthink a lot. Means like that ki when I kind of like execute the design, I kind of like focus on that ki make sure my design is really good, really great, and really amazing in every possible way. Okay, yeah. So I'm kind of like make sure that my design is kind of like look really perfect, and for that perfection, I kind of like actually messed up everything. Okay. So instead of kind of like actually focus on perfection, focus on consistency, and this is what I want because I'm not in that particular stage where I could kind of like focus on perfection. I have very less subscriber, very less follower, so it is really essential for me to be consistency. Okay, yeah, and this kind of like stuff that really matter. So that's why after this Artifact, I will focus on kind of like a simply very simple design. Okay, yeah, and I will gonna execute that stuff. All right. So this is what exactly happened today. Whatever. Okay, this is all this actually happen every single day. But let's just focus on question. Okay, because question is a kind of like a somebody very much essential factor. It kind of like a somebody kind of like a gives me purpose to take out Artifact, and I also kind of like a getting little bit of knowledge and stuff like that. All right. The question is, what if the Silk Road connected the different sorry the what if the Silk Road connected world differently? Okay. Now I understand this question. This question is little bit complicated, but not that much complicated. Okay, yeah. Okay, first of all, let's just understand first what exactly is this question. Okay, yeah. What exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Okay, before I kind of like continue this question, I wanted to kind of like take a pause because I am kind of like somebody had a number 2 pressure actually generated inside of my stomach, and I wanted to go to number 2, so I'm gonna pause here for a while. All right. Oh my god, now I feel really good. Whew, boy, I don't know, like every time I kind of like suddenly release my pressure out of my body, like number 2, I just feel like, wow, it felt like lighter. Yeah, it is that. Okay, question. Okay, I just completely forget about the question. Okay, the question is, what if the Silk Road connected the world differently? Okay. First of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It's kind of like force you to think about that reality and try to create that reality according to the knowledge that you have. Okay. Disclaimer, the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's kind of like simply my opinion, it's my thought, it's unfiltered, it's raw, and because of this unfiltered and things like that, so don't take this information very seriously, or don't take this information as a correct. No, like if you wanted to get this information, you need to go to the internet, you have multiple sources. I'm just trying to explain my opinion regarding about what I know about that particular stuff. All right, everybody good? Right, let's focus. Now, first of all, what is actually Silk Road, and why? First of all, let's just understand the basic thing. Okay, what is actually basic thing? A basic thing that ki you are run out of your groceries. You don't really have any kind of like a something groceries. Where did you bring groceries from? Obviously from supermarket or any kind of like a market or things like that, right? Yeah. So you need a some certain thing for living, right? If I need a Maggie, I need to go to the supermarket or any kind of like a kirana store, and I would gonna buy a Maggie. Okay, yeah. Then I make the Maggie, and yeah. So really basic things. Okay, yeah. Also, I'm very individual person, and whatever the stuff I really required, it kind of like a something close by to me. Like I need a Maggie, I get the Maggie very easily. I need a Cadbury chocolate or any kind of like a stuff, I could get that thing. Any kind of like a stuff means like a common stuff like sugar or kind of like a day to day kind of like a stuff that you want. You can get it very easily at your hometown, at your very close to your house. Okay, yeah. I'm not really sure about the US because in the US you will not found any kind of like a kirana store or any kind of like a some assembly store at your houses, because in US things are very different. Like a residential area and commercial area are kind of like a something separated by the district. Okay, yeah. So probably is this thing that ki I'm living in India, so residential and commercial are kind of like a mixed together. So probably I am getting kind of like all those things, like all the basic needs. I get it very easily. I don't really require to go outside of the cities. But in US, you have to go outside of the cities and then you buy some of the stuff and things like that, because the US have a kind of like a somebody defined. They kind of like a divide the district in kind of like a multiple ways: residential, commercial, industrial, and things like that. Whatever, it's a very long topic. Okay, but first of all, let's just talk about kind of like a something that whatever I really required, I will get that thing. Okay, yeah. Now, if I need a kind of like a assembly helicopter part, do I get that thing? Obviously you will not get that thing. It's not a common thing. Okay, yeah. Like let's just say that I need a helicopter propeller. Obviously you will not get that thing, and you have to be go kind of like a somebody, you have to be go kind of like a say found such a distributor who are kind of like a somebody willing to selling those helicopter part. Obviously they are kind of like a really required your information: who are you, what kind of like a somebody person you are, why do you need this helicopter propeller, and things and that. They will gonna ask multiple questions, because the kind of like a somebody product that you want is very uncommon. Okay, it's a very unique in itself. So that's why they just wants you who you are, and until they verified that you are legit person, then they will kind of like sell you that helicopter part. Okay, now first of all, let's just understand this thing. If I need any kind of like a stuff, I will get that stuff at my kind of like a surrounding area. Okay, yeah. Now I'm trying to tell you all this scenario from my point of perspective. Also this time of perspective, this time means like that in modern world. But if you went to the kind of like somebody like a 1,000 year ago, or maybe kind of like somebody 2,000 3,000 year ago, things might be very change over there. Okay, because at that time there is no kind of like a store, there is nothing really at all. Okay, so possibly is this thing, what do you need any kind of like a stuff, it's very hard to get. Probably some of the kind of like a common thing that you can get very easily, like basically if you need any kind of like a wheat or anything, you can get that thing. Okay, yeah. For that particular purpose, you are kind of like a utilizing barter system. Now what's a barter system? Like basically in today's world, if I want a Maggie, I have to be give them 10 rupees and I will get Maggie. Okay, yeah. So basically the money is a kind of like a something that currency that I transact to me with this shopkeeper, and kind of like a something that money is kind of like a letting me to kind of like a get the things that I want. Okay, yeah. But the money is not exist 2,000 3,000 year ago. So at that time people are using barter system. Now what's a barter? A barter system means like that ki I need a sugar, 1 kilo of sugar. So like basically at that time sugar is not even exist, by the way. Why sugar is not even exist? Because let me tell you one thing, the sugar that you are kind of like simply eating right now or kind of like consume right now is kind of like a simply processed sugar. Okay, yeah. Like most of the sugar actually came from sugar cane, and those are sugar cane are processed and then kind of like a create a kind of like a simply crystalline structure. That crystalline structure is actually came from the processing. Okay, yeah. 2000, 3000 year ago, how does that sugar crystalline structure created? There is no processing plant. There is nothing really at all. So you will not gonna get sugar 2000, 3000 year ago, but still, if you need any kind of like rice or wheat or anything at all, you will get that thing. Not that much difficult. Like it's very difficult, but still, if you need any kind of like let's just say you need a rice. Okay, yeah, 1 kilo of rice. By the way, at that time the kilo is not even exist, by the way. Like basically at that time people are kind of like a trading the kind of like a somebody like a like what exactly is this thing, what is actually that? At that time people are kind of like somebody visualizing the visualizing that what is actually bigger and what is actually smaller. What do you mean by that? Okay, it means that na ki let's just say that ki if I kind of like somebody fill up the rice of like let's just say that ki I have bowl. Okay, yeah, and basically that bowl is kind of like a fill with the rice. Okay, yeah, and how what is actually the weight of that thing? There is at that time there is no kind of like a standardized unit, nothing really at all. So how does people actually trade? Okay, yeah, at that time barter system was exist. In this barter system, what is actually happened that ki if I kind of like somebody give you one bowl of wheat, that means other person will give me exactly one bowl of rice. Okay, yeah, so this is kind of like a simply the trade unit at that time. Means like that ki most of people are kind of like a simply assuming the how much kind of like a simply like basically equivalent. Like at that time people actually consume that ki this bowl like if I fill up the entire bowl by rice and if I fill up the entire bowl of wheat, then probably this is kind of like a consider a trade unit, and that's then I could kind of like a trade to that another person. Okay, so this is called kind of like a barter system. It's way much kind of like a little bit difficult, not really that difficult, but because there is no currency at all, na. Okay, so at that time people are kind of like assembly. If they want any kind of like assembly the rice, you have to give them one bowl of wheat. They also give me one bowl of rice and things like that, and then trade was actually happen. Okay, yeah. Now, as I mentioned, this is very common thing. Wheat, rice. Okay, yeah, very common thing. Okay, yeah. But if you need any kind of like a very special material, now what's the special material? Let's just say that ki at that time red diamond or multiple colors of kind of like a stones are very rare at that time. Okay, yeah, and you will not get that much easily. Let me tell you one thing. The land, okay, like basically there is some sort of kind of like a soil is very good for kind of like assembly making bigger monument or things like that. Okay, yeah, like marbles or things like that. Obviously those are material you will not get everywhere. Okay, so those material are kind of like assembly available in some part of the world, and some part of the world you will not get that thing. So obviously you need a kind of like assembly get that thing. Okay, yeah, now it's a very kind of like assembly very difficult to how to supposed to do that thing, because in today's world we actually trade by ocean. Okay, like basically most of our trade is kind of like a pass through by oceans. Okay, yeah, we have kind of like a bigger container kind of like assembly so big container ships. They are kind of like assembly having like a thousands of kind of like a container that kind of like assembly went from one continent to another continent, and kind of like assembly the trade is actually happened. Okay, yeah, but almost like a 2000 3000 like a thousands of year ago we don't really have that thing. We don't really have that kind of like container ship or nothing really at all. So we are kind of like a utilizing a way, a land way. Okay, we are kind of like a connecting each civilization through land. Okay, now there at that time there are multiple civilization exist. Okay, Indus Valley civilization. Okay, or maybe Indian civilization, probably Indus Valley civilization, then couple of people actually went from Indus to India and things like that. So let's just consume little bit cluster of people actually living in southern Asia. Okay, yeah. Then in China there is a kind of like some Chinese civilization is also kind of like a live in China. Okay, yeah. Northeast China, Northeast Asia and things like that. No, Northeast nine, like basically in the north. Okay, yeah. Then there is a Mesopotamia and kind of like a something that ki Egyptian. Okay, yeah. These are kind of like a civilization that actually exist in Middle East, and some of the civilization are actually kind of like a went from Middle East to Europe. Okay, yeah. So these are kind of like a four corner of civilization. By the way, some of the kind of like a civilization are actually exist in kind of like a simply African too. Okay, so this is kind of like a civilization. Okay, in this particular civilization, I am not counting Aztec civilization. I'm not counting any kind of like a simply American civilization. Why? Because at that time there is no trade route actually exist. Because at that time America was not even found at that time. Okay, and basically the people who actually live in America or North or South America, they don't really know that ki Europe or Asia is actually exist, and Asian people don't really know there is a kind of like some America or North America exist. Okay, yeah. So they don't know that. So basically, this thing there is no true trade route actually exist with the US at that time. Not US is America, North America, South America. There is no kind of like a trade route. So there is a four civilization at that time. Indian civilization, okay, South Asia civilization, then kind of like a Chinese civilization, Middle East, and then Europe civilization. Okay, yeah. So these are kind of like a civilization are connected by the lands. Okay, yeah, by Asia. Now, what exactly is this thing that ki how do I supposed to kind of like a send some sort of kind of like a material from one place to another place? Okay, yeah, because let me tell you one thing, there is a kind of like a thousands of kilometers are you have to be travel. In this particular travel distance, you have to be kind of like a went through desert, mountains, cold, forest, lot of stuff. How do I supposed to do this thing? It's so much difficult to do all these things, but you have to do it. Okay, yeah, you need a kind of like a marble to kind of like made the monument, so obviously you have to be get that marble, because that marble you will not gonna get anywhere at all. If you need any kind of like a rare earth material, like basically the stones and things and that, you will not gonna get that thing. Like let's just say Taj Mahal. Okay, the Taj Mahal is a kind of like a beautiful monument. The kind of like all those kind of like a material that comes from kind of like a Middle East, that comes from kind of like simply the Central Asia or things like that. This trade is actually happened by Silk Road. Okay, yeah. Now let me tell you by Silk Road. What is actually Silk Road and why this kind of like this road called Silk Road? Okay, yeah. So first of all, let me tell you a couple of things. Okay, yeah. In trade route, most of the kind of like India has a benefit. Okay, yeah. Southeast Asia. Okay, yeah. Why? Because Southeast Asia is a very fertile land. Okay, it has a Himalayan. Because of the Himalaya, it has a kind of like some heavy rainfall is actually happened. Because of the heavy rainfall happened, the kind of like Indian plateau is kind of like a very much fertile, very big fertile, like a really good fertile. Okay, and they are kind of like somebody making really good fertilizers. So they are making like a really good wheat and soil, like they are wheat, rice and things like that. Like basically the the land is very fertile, so the population are very increase in Indian continent. Okay, sub-Indian continent. Another thing is that because of this land is very much fertile, so there is so much amount of kind of like something the species and so much amount of kind of like some animals are actually exist. Okay, yeah. And basically because of India is a very subcontinent country, and as also it has a very heavy rainfall, so there are a lot of material, there is a lot of raw material are kind of like some execute or kind of like some created in this Indian continent. Okay, yeah. By the way, in Chinese civilization, they also get a lot of stuff too. They also kind of like some creating a lot of raw materials and things like that. But most of the times, India is a very kind of like assembly. You will get a lot of raw materials. Okay, yeah. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that the European civilization, they need kind of like assembly those stuff. They need a kind of like assembly the material from Southeast Asia and Chinese and kind of like a Middle East. They want that. They want to make their monument as good as possible as it can. They want kind of like a tea, and they want anything. One of the biggest thing is that ki a silk. Okay, yeah. Because of, let me tell you one thing, India is very fertile. So there is a kind of like a simply the insect who kind of like a make a silk. Okay, I'm not really sure how this actually make, but I just heard that ki like because of the silk production in India is so much that it kind of like a make costume, and that costume is really good. Okay, yeah, it kind of like a look really good in every possible way, and it's really amazing. Okay, yeah. When some of the trader are actually utilizing those silk clothes and went to Europe, people are kind of like a mesmerized by the how that clothes is really good or not. Okay, how this clothes is really good. Okay, they are kind of like impressed by this fabric or things like that, and they want more. So they are kind of like a trading this kind of like a silk from, actually this silk is actually came from like a Kolkata or specifically Bengal region. Okay, yeah. The today's world is a Bangladesh, and kind of like a Bengal region. Like this is kind of like a somebody heavy execute like a heavy production of silk is actually happened in that particular area, and those silk are kind of like a trade from this Bengal region to the Europe. Okay, yeah. And because of this, so much amount of silk is kind of like a simply transfer from Bengal region to Europe. So that route is called as a Silk Road, because that trade route is kind of like a simply called as a kind of like a Silk Road and things like that. Okay, now I'm trying to kind of like some emphasize some of the stuff. Okay, um, the way that you think it is that the route is kind of like so simple and so easy and things, there is not. Okay, yeah. Like let me tell you one thing, at that time the trade route was exist, but because of this trade route it was so very difficult to do this thing. Like basically, just can you imagine, like basically you are kind of like taking a raw material and you are transferring raw material from one part of the world to the another part of the world. It takes so much amount of time and so much amount of things and stuff like that. So basically is this thing, the people who are kind of like a trading, they really required a kind of like a some certain place to stay, because the route is very difficult, route is very like dangerous. Okay, every possible way you cannot kind of like a complete this route in one go. That is not gonna possible. Even if you have horse and things like that, still you need a kind of like a time to rest or things like that. So where do we supposed to stay? So in this Silk Road, there is a multiple cities are kind of like a born or kind of like a happened in the Silk Road. Okay, yeah. Now in the Silk Road, there are multiple cities are kind of like something established, like Persian, or like I'm not really sure, but there are so many kind of like some cities like Kabul, Baghdad, then I'm not really sure, but there are so many kind of like a Silk Road cities. By the way, let me Google it. I'm Silk Road city. Okay, so there are multiple kind of like some Silk Road cities. Bukhara, Samarkand, okay, yeah, Khiva in Central Asia, Dhunarg, Kashgar in China, Merv in Turkmenistan, which are all kind of like a something the kind of like a Silk Road cities. Okay, yeah. Why am I kind of like a focus on that Silk Road city? Okay, yeah. Because like basically you haven't really heard those names. Okay, yeah, probably because those cities are might not kind of like a simply right now exist, or maybe kind of like a simply like a gone. Okay, yeah, because we are not using Silk Road till now, but because of the Silk Road, there is lot of kind of like a things happen. Lot of things happen. What exactly things happen? What I'm trying to tell you? Okay, yeah. as I mentioned, the people who are kind of like simply going from this Silk Road, okay, yeah, they need a place to stay. They need a place to stay. So they are kind of like simply started living in these particular cities. Okay, yeah. They are kind of like a rest over there. Okay, yeah. And they are kind of like continue their journey. Now, what is actually happened? Okay, yeah. Because of all those four civilizations are actually exist in kind of like a all four corner of the world. Okay, yeah, all four corner of Asia continent, not world. Okay, yeah, I'm not actually including the kind of like a simply American continent. No, only Asian continent. Okay, Europe and Asia continent. Okay, yeah. So at that time, okay, yeah, the four civilization was actually exist in this continent, which kind of like a very much far away. Okay, yeah. The Silk Road is the only way opportunity. It's the only event that all four civilizations are gathered together and they kind of like a do the journey together. Okay, yeah. Like basically the people who from India, people who from Europe, people who from kind of like some Middle East or Africa, Chinese civilization, like the people, all the people who are kind of like a came into this road, this Silk Road. Okay, yeah. And they continue their journey together. And when they kind of like continue their journey together, they are kind of like simply sharing their details, knowledge, informations. Okay, yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you, what is this thing? The Silk Road is not just a kind of like a road where you could kind of like somebody transport your material from one place to another place. No, this is the road where you could share the ideas regarding about what is actually world look like. So what is actually this thing? Share the ideas, knowledge, and things like that. Because at that time there is no books, there is no internet, there is nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. The people who are kind of like sharing those ideas through the verbal communications. Okay, yeah. And this is the only road where people would kind of like a talk and people talk about their ideas, what they know, what is actually happened in their continent, what is actually happened in their empire, and things and that and that and that. And when they talk about that, they are getting the knowledge. Okay, yeah. And when they get the knowledge, they are kind of like sharing those knowledge to their civilization. Okay, so which is really good. Like let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah. The Aristotle is also kind of like a person who kind of like found that our earth is not a flat, our earth is a sphere. Okay, yeah. So but basically is this thing, this information, like if I kind of like invented any kind of like a stuff, I would kind of like go to the internet and I would kind of like tell them, okay, this is the stuff that I invented, and everyone might gonna listen and things like that. Okay, yeah. But at that time, the people who are kind of like invented a lot of really big things. Like Aristotle kind of like defined that Earth is sphere, not flat. The Pythagoras are kind of like invented a lot of theorems and things like that. The way that the kind of like assembly, the sky reading, the like basically everything. Okay, yeah, every information, culture, knowledge, traditional, everything is kind of like assembly shared by this trade route, shared by this kind of like assembly, the Silk Road. And because of this Silk Road, they are kind of like assembly sharing a lot of informations, and those information are passed through the each civilization, which kind of like leads to growth and things like that. Okay, so because of this Silk Road, it's very much essential. Okay, yeah. Now if I'm the question is that what if we change our Silk Road? Okay, yeah. Like instead of kind of like going to the Middle East and things like that, what if the Silk Road is kind of like a went from like a Siberian winter or things like that? Well, it is not even possible, because at that time, okay, yeah, usually the Silk Road is actually executed from like basically it started from Kolkata, from China and things like that, and it merged into the Central Asia, okay, Kazakhstan or things like that. Okay, if I went to upper ahead like basically Siberia and things like that, then it would be kind of like a even more long cut. Because let me tell you one thing, now most of the trade is actually happened through Indian subcontinent to the Africa and Europe. Okay, yeah. The only people who are kind of like utilizing the Siberian kind of like some Siberian route are from China to Europe. Okay, yeah, because the like if I'm kind of like look at the perspective from the global, I'm kind of like a understanding from global point of perspective and what kind of like way they should supposed to be choose. Okay, yeah. The Chinese people might gonna use Siberian ways. Okay, the Siberian kind of like simply the the like basically Russian Siberia, they kind of like choose this part to go into the Europe. But probably this is not gonna happen, because let me tell you one thing, at that time Europe is not really that much kind of like a big thing. Okay, yeah. Mostly is this thing, the part of the Europe means like means like that ki most of the heavy civilization, like most of the trade is actually happened in subcontinent of South Asia to the China, and South Asia to Africa and Middle East. Okay, yeah. Siberia route is far more dangerous because it was really cold winter. Basically, at some certain point, a desert that like a we could kind of like somebody supposed to be survive the desert, but we cannot able to survive the winter, because winter is actually cripple our mindset. Not only mindset, cripple our body and things like that, and we might not gonna survive that Siberian winter because it's very far cold. Okay, yeah. And another thing is that now if I'm kind of like actually focus on multiple possibility, that key usually is this thing, the trade routes like from southern Asian trade routes actually started from kind of like a simply below the Himalaya. Okay, yeah. Means like that key like Nepal, then India, okay, Bengal region. Okay, yeah. They does not cross the Himalaya, because obviously not. Himalaya is very big mountain range, and probably they would kind of like a divert that. They just kind of like a dodge that kind of like a Himalayan mountain. So they just kind of like a choose from India to Pakistan, modern day Pakistan, to Afghanistan, to kind of like assembly the Iraq and Iran, okay, Persia, okay. So this kind of like assembly very simple and kind of like assembly very straight way to get into the kind of like assembly southern Asia to kind of like assembly the Africa and kind of like assembly Mesopotamia civilization. Okay, if you went to the Europe, then probably you have to be go from kind of like assembly the Iraq to Turkey to Ottoman to Europe to Britain and things like that. Okay, yeah. Now if the southern Asian people wanted to trade with the Chinese civilization, then they have to be crossed by Himalaya from Kashmir. Okay, yeah, from Kashmir to kind of like a went to Chinese civilization. But probably Tibet is kind of like a somebody bit more like a basically, let me tell you that Tibet is kind of like a somebody, the height of the Tibet is kind of like a far more heighted. So probably the trade route is actually happened bit more difficult than southern Asia to Africa to southern Asia to China. I'm not really sure regarding about this stuff. Probably. Okay, yeah. So if I'm kind of like simply thinking about the multiple possibilities that if the trade route is actually changed, the Silk Road was kind of like simply changed from this route to another route, then it's not gonna possible. Okay, because let me tell you one thing, the people who are kind of like simply traveling with the material and kind of like trading those all those things and stuff like that, they are kind of like making sure that they should supposed to be continue their journey as soon as possible as they can, but as well as they wanted to continue their journey with kind of like simply with the safety and things like that. They wanted to make sure that very less kind of like a natural calamities or national kind of like a disaster they will gonna face less. Okay, yeah. Because yeah, let me tell you one thing, Central Asia is a very desert area, and it's not really good. It's not really good kind of like a assembly route to kind of like execute the trade. But it is kind of like a far more easier than Siberian winter, because Siberian winter is a far more difficult. Okay, yeah, far more difficult. So probably, yeah, so that's why most of people actually choose this road. And because of this road, the entire civilization of the people, all four civilization of the people are kind of like gathered together and kind of like talk about their ideas and share things, and that it would kind of like add their value, and basically their ideas are actually share to the multiples in their own civilization, and kind of like leads to kind of like some improve their knowledge and things like that. So which is really good, right? By the way, it's not actually happened in just like a 1 to 3 year. It's actually happened by like a thousands of years. Okay, yeah. So it's a very long story. Okay, I'm really tired right now. So this is what I know about this particular stuff. Okay, the Silk Road and things like that. Also, the information that I tell in this artifact is not exactly right. So be advised and kind of like don't take this information very exactly like it's not exactly right. Okay, you have to be go to the internet and you will get the all the material that you need that is verified. The information that I'm trying to tell you is unverified. It's just my opinion. Okay, so maybe it's not right. Okay, yeah, or not wrong either too. All right, this is it. Thank you.